Hello everyone, today we will be presenting our project on the environmental concern that the world has been facing, especially in the fields of energy consumptions, greenhouse gas emissions, and renewable energy. In this project, we will be providing some of the insights, meanwhile, bringing some countries like Singapore as a comparisons with other countries in their actions towards the goal of a sustainable green environment. In the recent years, it was observed that there is an increasing trend in Singapore energy consumptions according to a report study done by Singapore Energy Market Authority. It was reported that Singapore have used up 50.8 terawatt of power in 2020 and 53.5 terawatts of power used in 2022, which is a rise by 5.3%. However, according to ASEAN Center for Energy report, it was observed that Singapore is not the top 3 countries that consume the most power among ASEAN countries in 2020, as it only holds small percentage of 4.4. This can be further seen and supported from the data we analyzed through SQL, which also shows the top 3 countries with the highest energy consumptions are Indonesia, Thailand, and Vietnam, which matches the data. This might be due to the recent increase of large companies setting up their manufacturer and production plant in these countries where high power is required for production as seen in this map. However, in terms of energy consumptions per capita and energy per GDP, Singapore stands the highest and is the dominating one as seen from the data we analyzed through SQL. To further understand this, our team have further researched and retrieved reports from the United Nations ESCAP and found out that those countries having a high energy consumption per capita are countries that are more developed, with 100% population being able to access to electricity. This provides us with the insights that within countries, urban areas tend to have better access to energy services, allowing them to have a higher usage of energy per populations. This may be due to a more advanced use of technology in their daily life. As seen in the chart, it was also reported that developed countries such as Singapore have a relatively low energy intensity as compared to less developed countries such as Laos and Vietnam. Energy intensity mainly talks about energy efficiency in energy consumptions. It was clearly seen that most ASEAN countries perform relatively well against the global energy intensity, especially for Singapore with the lowest energy intensity. This analysis provides us with the insights that even though developed countries have a relatively high energy consumption per capita, but with the knowledge on the usage of energy, it can be used more efficiently and fully utilized. Lastly, in terms of the type of energy used over the past few years, we could conclude that the 5 types of energy widely used are electricity, oil, natural gas, biofuel, and coal. And by comparing with the data from the United Nations, it provides us with the same insights on our analysis through SQL, which both shows oil having been the widely used and is deemed as something precious. And now I'll pass my time to Ryan.
Thank you, Wei-Ming. I am Ryan and now I'll be talking about question 13, which is about the topic if renewable energy can adequately power continued economic growth. So firstly, we have done some prior research on this topic. We found out that economic progress can be dependent on the usage of energy. However, excessive fossil fuel usage, which is not a renewable energy, can cause harm to the environment. Therefore, more and more nations are trying to convert their energy sources into renewable energy since it doesn't harm or harms the environment lesser. As you can see in this graph here, it shows that the cost of renewable energy, such as solar, coal, and wind, has fallen throughout the years from 2010 to 2017. And this led to companies around the world wanting to convert their energy sources into a renewable one. This is because the cost of energy will be lower for them compared to the normal usage, thus increasing company profits. With many companies changing their energy source, it can impact the economy as well. In South Africa, renewable energy creates lots of job opportunities for the citizens living there. It is forecasted that by 2050, more than 1 million jobs will be created if the country moves to renewable energy. We also found out that renewable energy consumption offers benefits, specifically to the Asian economies, and thus they can concentrate on economic progress instead of worrying on environmental problems. One of the sources that I found by Amri in 2017 was a research done before, and the person examining the link between economic growth, renewable energy, and the trade of nations from 1990 to 2012. He found a bidirectional association between international commerce and renewable energy usage, as well as a bidirectional relationship between trade and economic development among the developed countries. Another research was done in 1985 to 2014, and the researchers was focused on a dynamic relationship between renewable energy use, biocapacity, and economic growth. The outcome of the research showed that there will be an economic expansion after the use of renewable energy. Now I'll be moving to the analysis. First, we use MySQL to look at the OB energy data where many countries and different energies were present in the dataset. We use SQL to code and filter down the different renewable energies we can compare, as well as filtering to only the Asian countries, as in the research, it was stated that Asian countries were significantly impacted, and the output is shown below. For the first analysis, we compared the different Asian countries and their usage on hydro energy, which was a renewable energy. We used a box plot to analyze it and realized that Vietnam has the overall highest median hydro energy usage among all the other countries. Therefore, Vietnam will be the base comparison amongst other countries. We compared the GDP of Vietnam to Laos and Myanmar, as their hydro energy usage have a lower median than Vietnam. As you can see in both of the graph, Vietnam dominates both Laos and Myanmar's GDP, and this proves that the usage of renewable energy does have a positive impact on the country's GDP. For our second analysis, we compared the different Asian countries and their usage on renewable electricity, which is also a kind of renewable energy. Yet again, Vietnam has a high median usage of renewable electricity. However, due to fairness, we will not be using Vietnam and we'll be using Philippines instead, who also have a high median usage. Thus, Philippines will be used as the base comparison amongst other Asian countries. We compared Philippines GDP to Malaysia and Cambodia, who have a fairly lower median than the Philippines, and the outcome showed that Philippines GDP is higher than both Malaysia and Cambodia. All in all, it is proven that GDP does have a correlation with the usage of renewable energy. Both of them are directly proportional to each other because when renewable energy increase, GDP will increase as well. And to conclude, renewable energy indeed powers continued economic growth. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dan, and I'll be going through question 14, which asks whether Singapore should go nuclear in future, given the environmental and economical feasibility of micro-nuclear reactors. So we believe that yes, Singapore should aim to go nuclear in future. So firstly, to set a context, what are micronuclear reactors? A nuclear reactor essentially produces heat through a process called fission and converts it into steam that spins a turbine to ultimately generate electricity. A micronuclear reactor takes this concept and makes it into a more compact manner. It is smaller and safer than regular nuclear reactors due to the size. As seen here, some micronuclear reactors are even mobile enough to fit into the back of a truck's container. It also has the ability to generate up to 20 megawatts, and with the usage of nuclear energy, it is thus a zero-emission clean energy source. So to explain why we believe nuclear is the way to go, we look at some problems Singapore faces in the energy department. So firstly, a lack of alternative energy sources. As in the SQL output from 2010 to 2020, not much have changed locally in terms of energy sources used, with the bulk of it consistently being fossil fuels. So this could be due to the fact that Singapore is naturally resource-constrained country, meaning some alternatives like hydroelectric or geothermal sources are unable to be utilized. If we were to delve into specifics, we can see that fossil energy is predominantly the main source of energy across the years. Solar energy is having a rise in recent years as Singapore is placing more emphasis on renewable sources and trying to decarbonize. Even though this is a promising trend, there are some limitations that solar energy faces in Singapore. So due to land constraints in Singapore, there is a limit to how much solar panels we can put up. And even if we were to utilize all the potential spaces, it will only be able to meet about 10% of the projected demand in 2050. So furthermore, it is susceptible to weather conditions and the stability and reliability of the power supply could be affected. A better alternative in this case would be to adopt nuclear energy as it has way larger capacity. In 2020, in the United States, nuclear energy was able to produce at maximum power over 92% of the time, compared to solar energy's 24.9%. So this proves the stability and reliability of nuclear energy. Furthermore, due to the compactness of micronuclear reactors, it is space efficient, which addresses the space constraints that Singapore faces. As seen in this chart, there is a general trend of increasing greenhouse gas emissions in Singapore, primarily due to carbon dioxide, which is a byproduct of burning fossil fuels for energy. This heavy reliance on fossil energy might make Singapore's aim of achieving net zero emissions by 2050 seem like a tall order. Furthermore, in 2021 alone, through the usage of nuclear energy, US was able to avoid 476.5 million metric tons of carbon dioxide emissions. So this exemplifies the positive impact nuclear energy has on the environment and could be the solution for Singapore moving forward in reducing carbon emissions. Lastly, as seen in this chart, we can see that from 2010 to 2020, imports of energy products have been dominated by fossil products like petroleum and crude oil, making out 90% of all energy product imports. This amount of imports have also constantly been above 100,000 KTOE, which reflects Singapore's reliance on imports for energy due to a lack of resources. This trend is worsened by the fact that the cost of fossil fuels like petroleum and crude oil are skyrocketing due to demand and the war in Ukraine. This makes it financially unsustainable for Singapore in the long run. An alternative has to be adopted, and we believe going nuclear is the viable path. The micronuclear reactors required are cheaper and also reduces the need for imports of fossil fuels. So in the long run, this can generate great cost savings for Singapore. All in all, we believe that the adoption of micronuclear reactors and nuclear energy will be beneficial in the long run due to three main resources. Firstly is compactness, lower cost, and sustainability as an energy source.
Question 15 states that despite increasing awareness of environmental issues, some people still remain skeptical about climate change being a problem. So this poses the question on whether climate change problems are really associated with man-made emissions. And the answer to that is yes. Climate change problems are indeed associated with emissions, and this will be proven with the following examples. Firstly, please take a look at this line graph, which shows the amount of greenhouse gas emissions from 2000 to 2015. Kindly note that only these particular years are being showcased, as some of the following data are only available up to 2015. Hence, all data is showcased up to 2015 to ensure consistency. Besides, the main factor that I will be talking about is correlation, which will be elaborated later on. So, as seen from the first graph, greenhouse gas emissions have increased by nearly twofold since the year 2000. This is fatal to the environment as these gases trap heat in the atmosphere, which then results in the rise of global temperatures. As seen from the orange line, the average global temperatures are indeed rising steadily. This therefore coincides with the science, based on research of course, that greenhouse gases are warming our climate and hence provides a correlation between greenhouse gas emissions and increasing temperatures. One of the consequences of this is the decrease of sea ice extent, which by definition is the area of ice covering the Arctic Ocean. The presented figure illustrates this correlation, whereby it can be seen that each increment of temperature generally results in a decrement in sea ice extent. Hence, with global temperatures consistently rising, it is worrying that sea ice extent will soon drop to an alarming level, which in reality means that glaciers are melting faster than the rate of accumulating new snow. As these new glaciers melt, more water will eventually run into the ocean, causing overall sea levels to rise and potentially covering more of the planet.
So the first finding is that there is indeed a correlation between the increase in emissions and the increase in land temperature as well as the decrease in sea ice extent. So our goal is to establish that there is not only a correlation but a causation between man-made emissions and climate change. So in the next session, our group will be combining external research with both the sustainability and the Greenworld datasets. So according to the United States Statistics Division, China tops the list when it comes to manufacturing. The country makes up 28.4% of the total global manufacturing output. And following this, the United States is at number 2, with 16.8% of global production. Researchers have found that the United States is currently experiencing record-breaking wildfire seasons, stronger hurricanes, and other signs of negative environmental changes. This has prompted the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change to issue a report warning against carbon emissions after witnessing the terrible environmental effects in the US. So we did a cross-comparison of the external research with our datasets, and we pulled up the top 5 countries with the highest gas emission. In the sustainability dataset, we discovered the United States is the largest emitter, since China was not included in this dataset. And in the Greenworld dataset, the data supports the external research, showing that China was first, followed by the US in greenhouse gas emission. So China is already experiencing frequent coastal flooding, storm surges, coastal erosion, and saltwater intrusion. So these are all negative effects of climate change. The consequence of climate changes can be observed in these countries with extremely high levels of greenhouse gas emissions. So, if these effects do not indicate the significance of human-caused climate change, then what does? According to a Science and Environmental report, it was concluded that our actions today will shape how people and nature respond to increasing climate risk. So essentially, people are critical in determining climate change. So in conjunction with the information we have gathered, our team's hypothesis is that human emissions of greenhouse gases significantly contribute to climate change. Thank you.